A scullery maid in 1870 wrote 3 words in her diary before she died: "My hands are gone." She was 14. Her employer never recorded her name. This is the reality that period dramas never show you. Servants worked 18-hour days in freezing attics. Children were separated from families they would never see again. Women were fired the moment a pregnancy showed and then sent to workhouses to die. The upper classes controlled the records, so they controlled the story. Subscribe to our channel to keep watching videos like this. These are 20 documented facts about Victorian servants that history tried to erase. Number 1. The scale of servant life in Victorian Britain was staggering. In 1891, the census recorded more than 1.5 million domestic servants across the country. 1 in 3 working women was in service. To put that in perspective, there were more servants than coal miners, and more than the number of factory workers in textiles. It was the single largest employment category in the entire nation. Most of these workers lived inside the homes where they worked. They slept in attics, ate in basements, and existed in a parallel world that the family upstairs pretended not to see. Number 2, the ages will shock you. Children entered service as young as 8 years old. Some families sent daughters away at 6 if money was tight enough. These were not apprenticeships with training and futures. A scullery maid at 8 meant scrubbing pots in cold water before dawn. It meant sleeping on kitchen floors. The law technically required school attendance, but enforcement was a joke. Employers simply called these children half-timers and worked them around the minimal schooling requirements. By 12, most were working full adult hours with no protection whatsoever. Number 3, servants were designed to be invisible. Household manuals from the era spelled this out in explicit detail. Servants used back staircases so they would never cross paths with the family. They pressed themselves against walls if a family member appeared unexpectedly. Eye contact was forbidden. Speaking unless spoken to meant immediate punishment. Here is the part most people do not know. Many households changed the names of servants entirely. If the family already had a maid named Mary, the new girl became Jane, regardless of her actual name. Their identities were inconvenient, so employers simply erased them. One servant recalled, decades later, that she forgot her real name for years. Number 4, the hours would be illegal in any modern prison. A typical day started at 5 or 6 in the morning and ended past midnight. Days off barely existed. Some servants reported going months without leaving the house. 18-hour shifts were standard. They slept in unheated attic rooms, often sharing beds with strangers. In winter, water froze in their wash basins overnight. The family downstairs had fires in every room, and the servants who maintained those fires shivered through the night. Number 5. The physical toll destroyed bodies before 30. Housemaid's knee was so common it became a medical term. It came from years of scrubbing floors on hands and knees without padding. Scullery maids developed permanent damage to their hands from constant immersion in harsh chemicals and freezing water. Some lost feeling in their fingers entirely. But here is the detail few people mention. The wallpaper in wealthy homes often contained arsenic. Servants who cleaned these walls daily absorbed poison through their skin. Mysterious illnesses, hair loss, and early deaths were blamed on weak constitution. The real cause stayed hidden for decades. By the time science confirmed the danger, countless servants had already died from it. Their employers never faced consequences. Number 6. The character reference system created total control. When a servant left employment, they needed a written reference to find new work. One bad letter meant permanent unemployment. Masters knew this and used it as leverage. Complain about conditions and you risk your future. Report abuse and you could lose everything. The reference had to come from the employer, no exceptions. This created a system where servants endured almost anything rather than speak up. Court records from the era show servants who stayed in abusive households for years because leaving without a reference meant the workhouse. The families held absolute power, and they knew it. Number 7. Sexual exploitation was endemic and almost never punished. Male employers and their sons treated female servants as available. The term master's right appeared in enough accounts that historians consider it a recognized pattern. When servants became pregnant, the response was immediate dismissal. No reference, no severance, no acknowledgement of what had happened. The women were simply gone. Here is what makes it worse. Servants who reported assault faced disbelief at best and prosecution for slander at worst. The legal system protected property and reputation. A servant's word against a gentleman's word was no contest. Many women ended up in workhouses with children they never wanted, carrying the names of men who faced no consequences. Court documents from the period show case after case dismissed because a servant's testimony was considered inherently unreliable. The system was not broken, it was working exactly as designed. Number 8. Surveillance was constant and deliberate. Servants lived under watch every moment. Bell systems tracked their movements through the house. If a bell rang and the response took too long, punishment followed. Doors to servant quarters were locked from the outside at night. Employers read outgoing letters before they were sent. Incoming mail was opened first by the housekeeper. Visitors were forbidden without explicit permission, and that permission was rarely granted. Think about that. These workers lived inside someone else's home with no privacy, no communication they controlled, and no way to leave after dark. The house was both workplace and prison. Number 9, wage theft was built into the system through a phrase that sounded generous. The term "all found" meant the employer provided room and board, so wages could be reduced accordingly. In practice, it meant deductions for everything. Broken dishes came out of pay, candle stubs were counted, food was measured, and any extra consumption was charged. Some servants ended months owing money to their employers rather than receiving wages. Household account books from the era show systematic deductions that left workers with almost nothing. The promise of shelter became a tool for exploitation. Servants who complained were reminded they could always leave, without a reference, of course. Number 10. The erasure was intentional and thorough. Family photographs from wealthy Victorian households almost never included servants. When servants accidentally appeared in the background, photographs were cropped or retaken. Family portraits commissioned from painters excluded the staff entirely. Household records listed expenses for servant wages, but they rarely recorded names. Birth and death certificates for servants often contained errors or missing information because no one bothered to verify details. Here is what that means. Millions of people who built and maintained the British Empire left almost no trace. Their labor created the wealth. Their bodies maintained the comfort. When they died, they vanished from the record as completely as if they had never existed. It was erasure by design. Number 11. Servant hierarchies created cruelty that flowed downward. The butler looked down on the footman. The footman looked down on the hallboy. The cook ruled the kitchen staff with absolute authority, and everyone looked down on the scullery maid at the bottom. These internal divisions prevented solidarity. Servants competed against each other for favor, rather than uniting against unfair conditions. Upper servants often enforced discipline more harshly than the family did. A lady's maid who had survived years of abuse saw no reason to spare the new girl. The system reproduced itself through those who had suffered most. Number 12. Informants were rewarded and trust was weaponized. Employers encouraged servants to report on each other. A tip about theft or laziness or inappropriate behavior could mean a small bonus or extra privileges. It could also mean watching a coworker dismissed without reference. The household became a network of surveillance, where anyone might be reporting to the family. Court records show servants testifying against each other in theft cases, often for items worth pennies. The system turned potential allies into threats. Friendship was risky. Silence was survival. Number 13. Some servants did fight back. Theft rings operated in wealthy households with staff passing items to accomplices outside. Arsenic poisoning cases appeared in court records with disturbing regularity. Servants who had endured years of abuse sometimes reached a breaking point. House fires of mysterious origin destroyed estates, and investigations rarely found the cause. Here is the part most people do not know. These were not isolated incidents. Court records from London alone show hundreds of cases involving servant resistance between 1850 and 1900. The newspapers rarely covered them. The families preferred silence to scandal. Number 14. Escape routes existed, but they came with brutal costs. Immigration schemes sent servants to Australia and Canada, but the ships were often death traps. Factory work meant worse conditions and lower status. Marriage required meeting someone, and that meant leaving the house, and leaving required permission. The few who managed to marry employers or their sons became scandals rather than success stories. Some women chose prostitution over the workhouse. Records show former servants appearing in arrest logs within months of dismissal. The path from respectable service to the streets was terrifyingly short. Number 15. The workhouse waited for everyone who failed. Dismissed without a reference meant no legitimate employment. No employment meant no housing. The workhouse system separated families, forced labor in exchange for survival, and marked inmates with permanent shame. Conditions were deliberately harsh to discourage applications. Servants knew this fate waited if they spoke up, complained, or failed to satisfy their employers. The workhouse was not just a safety net, it was a threat that kept the entire system functioning. Bodies were buried in unmarked graves on workhouse grounds. The last workhouse did not close until 1930. That is right, within living memory. The fear it created shaped servant behavior for generations. Number 16. Servants left more behind than their employers ever intended. The recipes that defined British cooking came from kitchen staff who never received credit. Mrs. Beeton's famous cookbook compiled techniques that cooks had developed over generations. Household slang invented by servants entered common English. The word snob originally described someone without nobility, and servants used it to mock their employers' pretensions. Cleaning methods developed through trial and error in Victorian kitchens are still used today. The servants were erased from history, but their innovations survived. Number 17. DNA is revealing secrets that Victorian families tried to bury forever. Genetic testing has confirmed what historians long suspected. Aristocratic bloodlines appear in working-class families across Britain with no documented explanation. The math is unavoidable. Male employers fathered children with servants. Those children were dismissed along with their mothers, and the genetic evidence dispersed into the general population. Modern descendants are discovering connections to noble families through ancestry tests. The families who denied these relationships for generations cannot argue with science. Number 18. Diaries are emerging from attics and auction houses after more than a century in hiding. Servants who could write sometimes kept secret records of their experiences. These documents were dangerous to own while in service, so many were hidden and forgotten. Estate sales and house clearances have uncovered journals that contradict the official version of Victorian household life. Digitization projects are now making these accounts accessible to researchers worldwide. What these diaries reveal is this: the servants knew exactly what was happening to them. They documented the abuse, the theft of their labor, and the hypocrisy of families who preached Christian charity while working children to exhaustion. They had no power to change it while alive. Their words waited in darkness until someone finally listened. Number 19. Recognition is finally arriving, more than a century late. Memorial projects across Britain are adding servant names to historical records. Country houses that once erased their staff now include servant history in tours. Documentaries are telling stories that period dramas avoided. Academic programs study servant life as legitimate history rather than background detail. The people who built and maintained the British Empire are slowly becoming visible again. Museums, that once displayed only aristocratic belongings now show servant quarters and working conditions. School curricula are changing to include domestic labor in lessons about the Victorian era. The correction is incomplete and painfully slow, but it is happening. Number 20, one servant's story shows how history sometimes corrects itself. Hannah Colwick worked as a maid for decades in the mid-19th century. She kept detailed diaries and allowed her secret lover, a gentleman named Arthur Munby, to photograph her. Some images showed her in work clothes, covered in grime. Others showed her in chains, a deliberate statement about her condition. These photographs were hidden for nearly a century. Today, Hannah Colwick is studied in universities. Her diaries are published and analyzed. Scholars recognize her documentation as deliberate resistance, a working-class woman creating evidence of her own existence when every system tried to erase her. She could not change her circumstances while alive, but she made sure someone would eventually know the truth. These facts are real, researched in archives and court records. Period dramas buried them because exploitation does not sell costumes. The families who employed servants controlled the story for generations, but documents survive. Diaries surface. DNA tells truths that official records denied. The 1.5 million people who powered Victorian Britain are finally becoming visible after more than a century of deliberate erasure. History does not always remember who it should, but sometimes it corrects itself. If you learned something new, share this video. If you want to know more about the history they tried to bury, subscribe.